Well, welcome to the conversation today. I have my special guest, Rowland Smith, and we're going to talk today about deconstruction and something we can talk a lot about, but we're going to focus in specifically on just some awareness we need to have as disciple makers around deconstruction. But for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about what you do, all of those
Okay.
different things and places that you swim in, because you are actually quite active and busy. So yeah, share with us the projects that you're part of right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I used to be busy just like all over the place. And so I've grown up a little bit to where I'm busy all in the same stream, maybe. And I think of it in terms of kind of three environments. So I have a staff position um, at a church in Colorado Springs called Pulpit Rock Church. And it's right next to a big rock formation that looks like a pulpit, which, is really good for our discussion today. But in this church, it's a little bit larger church that wants to shift and has been shifting missionally. It's a real anomaly of a church. And so we launched a micro church network out of Pulpit Rock, which we've been kind of mobilizing and trying to curate in Colorado Springs. And we just launched a Denver one, ironically, up by you. So that's kind of some cool work. And that's kind of like a full-time type gig. And then I provide visionary leadership for Forge America. So I'm the national director for Forge America. And my job is to just kind of look out ahead and, and kind of steer vision, be a national voice for that movement, which your listeners may be familiar with Forge, but I mean, they've heard of Alan Hirsch and Mike Frost and people like that, and they're the guys that started that movement. So I do that, and then I'm affiliate faculty at Fuller Seminary. So I teach like one class per term, so I don't overload myself on that. But I could see myself teaching more as I get older. So that may be my retirement job, is to engage students and seminaries and kind of blow up their idealism, of church and send them out as missionaries. That would be my thing, So
Blow them up and send them out. I love it.
Blow them out, send them out.
I mean, that's what we're going to talk about today, right? Deconstruction.
Yeah.
So I want you to just briefly talk about the experiment. I think that's what you call it, as an experiment that you've been running there. And then we'll kind of define what we each think deconstruction is.
Okay. Are you talking about my extra kids I have now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we were trying to, my wife and I, Kitty, we were trying to figure out, like, how do we engage our neighborhood? It was kind of getting to be a little bit post COVID, feeling like it was post COVID. And so I have, for a long time, I've been like a magnet to people that question the church and faith and things like that, especially 20-somethings and kind of early 30-somethings. And so I just kind of put it out on Facebook, or actually I started a Facebook group called COS Deconstruction Group. So I have a group on Facebook and it's called that. And so several people joined it. Some pastors joined it. Some college students joined it, And so, and it's not to sit there and complain. It's to put thoughtful things up that usually I find they're doing less content, but I'll put content out there that's, that's helpful. And that I think is helpful. And so that was kind of the first thing. And then I put it on Facebook and I put it in that group. Hey, we're going to do a 6-session study on it's a Pete study. I'm trying to remember how he titles it, but it's how the Bible actually works. I think that's what it's called. And so I got a few people that were takers, and so it's a real easy resource where you kind of watch a 15-minute video, and then, there's some questions that Pete provides, or you could do your own. And so we just started with that. And what I found were, in these mainly 20-somethings, was a mixture. It was a mixture of where they were now with, like, if you ask them, what do you think about church? What do you think about faith? What do you think about Jesus? What do you think about Christianity? All those kind of questions. They're in a mixture of different places, but they all stemmed from PTSD incidents. And some of them were singular things that you could point to, or a handful of things that they could actually name. It wasn't just, these weren't unthoughtful kids that were just like, I don't think church is cool. They actually had stuff happen to them and don't trust the church anymore. And it started them on journeys of, so if the church represents Jesus, and so then I don't know what I think of Jesus, or I think there's still a God that loves me, but maybe Christianity is not the best representation of that. And so there's very much was a connection between the church as the representative of Christ, of Jesus. And so they were questionable about Jesus and the theology around Jesus. And so, the sad part of all of this was that, this thing that we see out in culture with people that are going through quote unquote deconstruction, is that it seems like the church institution has been the instigator of their deconstruction, or the mobilizer of that. And my little experiment says, yeah, that's probably true. So
what's fascinating about deconstruction to me as a developmental neuroscientist, a person who, I believe in and love developmental theories, which look at how the way that we understand the world changes over time. So the way that we make meaning of relationships, make meaning of truth and concepts, that changes as we grow, experience life, things like that. And there are in developmental theories, there are two different main spaces of deconstruction. So the first one being between being a teenager and being an adult, where you deconstruct what the group knows and you come out of groupthink and kind of move into adult, here's what I think. And if you create a values-based way of looking at the world, and then you deconstruct out of that when you're older and you have all these negative experiences that kind of accumulate, and you're like, okay, well, maybe I don't actually know what I thought I knew, and I'm not as smart as I thought I was. It's not as clear. It's not as black and white. And that one's a much longer, messier deconstruction. But we think about, I think, as people who raise children to be, contributors to society, independent adults, contributors to society. I think we understand that they have to leave home in some way and make their way in the world and be able to do that, right? Be able to take care of their own households and pay their bills and have a job and have mature relationships. But as the church, we don't necessarily think about them leaving that same way and owning their own faith and making meaning of their own faith. And so just like things happen in a family, negative experiences happen in church too. But the church, and that's a thing that I don't exactly understand why, like, doesn't seem to accept or see this paradigm of raising spiritually maturing people to a place where they can have their own understanding of who Jesus is, have their own understanding of God, have their own, worship style, liturgy, theology stream, and choose that, like that ownership of their own faith doesn't seem to be a goal. So I think in the process of that, they they throw the baby out of the bathwater because there's no one to disciple them through that. So I'm wondering, what do you think about that? Like, if you have a different definition of deconstruction, or you see the relationship of the church and the idea of changing the way that we make meaning and understand our lives and the church's role in that. So what do
Yeah.
you think about that?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that. I think that the church, then this could get us way down a rabbit hole, but I think that the church, when I say the church, I mean like, the American Western church over the past, whatever, 100 years. It has set itself up for this because kind of what you're talking about, it's not discipling young adults into owning their own faith. Well, that's not how the church is built. Now, let me say, I do think that's how Jesus meant for things to happen, that people go on a journey, discover their pathway with Jesus, and they follow that, and it's kind of messy looking, with people kind of crossing in and out, and hey, I've seen you on this path before, and you're kind of wandering and coming back in and out, and you're figuring out what this framework looks like for you to follow Jesus. I think that's the healthy way of doing it. Church is not built that way in the past and historically. Church is built to be a bounded set. You come into our tribe and we're going to tell you what we believe. And if you agree with that, then we're going to invite you into our bounded box through some kind of process. And, if you've been baptized, if you sign a membership covenant, if you serve, if you give, if you attend, then you're kind of part of our tribe. And then you go on Sundays and someone tells you what to believe. And so kids have come up in that system for decades and decades and decades. And so I am not surprised that in our cultural upheavals right now, with the church being antagonistic to what young people are feeling, I'm not surprised that the young people are just saying, well, forget you, I'm heading off on my own. Because I think we've actually set that system up. We haven't provided a place for them to vocalize this, to journey this, to whatever. And that's why I think when I stick something out on Facebook, like as a little experiment, people actually answer the call, because they do love God. They do love Jesus. They do want a spiritual component of their life, but the church is not providing that. And I'm self-critiquing here, because I've been part of church leadership for 25 years. So there's that. The other thing I was thinking about while you were talking is, and this could get way long too, is I kind of think in terms of like long-term shifts, and then these radical disruptive shifts, right? And this is some work I'm doing in my dissertation right now. And, we, all of us that have you've studied a lot more learning theory than me, but all of us that have studied learning theory, we kind of know that there's a disruptive event that can happen. And then that kind of sends them into a remaking or a reframing of their new pathway. And so I think about myself and the learning shifts I've made over my life that are longer term. Those were healthier because I had a longer runway maybe to do those. Mm-hmm. So I've kind of, so that looks like I've matured. Maybe we use that word. I've matured. Some people would question that. But
I hope you're not looking for an amen there.
Yeah,
but.
I know. What we're doing right now to people that say, oh, I'm deconstructed, we're not doing that to them. What we're doing is we're dive bombing them through a disruption into chaos. And then there are a few people around that are saying, okay, join the conversation on what you're going to reconstruct and what that's going to look like. But man, the angle is so steep that it's painful. It's painful to the church. It's painful to the people going through it, and it's just unfortunate. We need more environments where people that say, however you define deconstruction, which I know we're going to do here in a second, but however you define that, we need more environments to just invite people into that and say, okay, let's take the steepness of the curve out of this and let's give you some runway to journey with God, And that's part of my kind of personal boots on the ground missional calling right now. Is I kind of feel called to that, and connecting with those kind of sojourners again. They're out there kind of wandering around. So
Right. I mean, it demonstrates how little the church is set up to make disciples, because we don't have an environment to even walk with them through the questioning, through the hard stuff, through the tearing apart, so that we can maintain relationship. Like for me, you maintain relationship in the deconstructing so that you retain credibility for the reconstructing, right? Because if you abandon them in the deconstructing, they're not going to look to you for answers. They're not going to, the words that you carry they don't have weight. And so just how little the environment of the church is set up to walk people through maturation
mhm,
of in a developmental, psychologically human way that we define that process of maturation. So
mhm.
any tweaks or things or color that you would add to the definition of deconstruction? I mean, like I said, I think
Well,
about it very specifically as a developmental
yeah,
neuroscientist, but I know
I
it has
mean,
different meanings for
yeah,
people.
yeah, it's I mean, it's one of those, it's a buzzword, isn't it? I mean, it gets people into trouble. And people that are very, okay, I'm gonna have to use terms to define terms. People that are maybe more conservative leaning, reformed, orthodox, they hear the word deconstruction and they think, oh, people that are walking away from their faith, maybe. I don't see that at all. I mean, I think I just see it as in a really practical sense. Um, some people have constructed a paradigm, a way of thinking about something, and that is being deconstructed. So when someone says, "Oh yeah, I'm a deconstructionist," most people don't say that. They'll use other terms. I ask a lot of other questions. It leads to other questions. So what does that mean to you? So what do you think about what do you think about Jesus? What do you think about God? Where are you in your spiritual life? And get them to define that. And with 2 or 3 questions, you can usually figure out pretty quick. Most that I've met have really just deconstructed the need for church institution, not a leaving of a spiritual journey or sojourning. Now, I will say again, because they see the church as the church institution as the representative of Jesus. That's how they were raised. Then they're starting to question that, and so they have a little bit more of a universalist kind of posture, although they wouldn't call it that, but they're more open to how is it that I connect with God? I mean, I had one gal in my group, and she, I mean, just beautiful person. I mean, she literally went through abusive kind of stuff in the church. And so I asked her point blank, I said, so do you believe there's a God that loves you? In group one night. And she said, yeah, there is a God that loves me. I'm just not sure that Jesus is the only way to have a relationship with him. So, very dogmatic, doctrinal based folks are going to say, oh, you're a universalist, you're not in our tribe anymore. I see that more as a point in the journey, that she's on. And I celebrated that there's a God that loves you. I looked at her and said, yes, there is a God that loves you. So for me, deconstruction is just there is something of a paradigm that has been taken down. It may be kind of institutional, it may be theological, and you just have to dig. You kind of have to ask questions and dig for where they are in that placement. So I think if you put a deconstruction group together in your neighborhood or your city or whatever, it's probably going to be mixed with people on different types of journeys. That's what I would say.
Yeah, because like I said, there's a couple different phases of questions, and depending on what they were raised with, right? So If
Mhm.
you were like this gal was raised with the only example of the kingdom on earth in the hands and feet of Jesus is the church, meaning institution, then to deconstruct that would be one type versus, well, I don't know if it's Jesus, or I don't know if there even is a God, or, the different components that we've made part of that essential belief that people
Mhm.
were raised with. Which part
Yeah.
of that, which part of that are they asking questions around? And one of the things that it always makes me think of is that if God is taking us on a journey that involves questions, because I do believe God is the author of our journey, and I don't think God's afraid of questions, right? It's we're the ones that are afraid of questions. God is really secure. He's really secure in the journey, in his authorship, in the answers, but he walks with us through that journey, and we're supposed to do that with one another. But because we've made dogma, whatever it is, so vital and right belief, the thing that's necessary for salvation, it just hurts my heart that we don't teach an idea of kingdom, an
Mhm.
idea of God, an idea of Jesus that are bigger than some of these boxes. Because God seems really secure in whether or not we have the box or take the box apart. Like, he lets some of us have the box. He's okay if some of us are taking the box apart.
Mhm.
Like he
Yeah.
seems to be okay in all of that. But we've constrained that there is only the box. And so when people take that apart, they just don't have things beyond that to hang on to. They don't have an understanding of a kingdom of God that exists outside of the church, or a Jesus that is relevant and present and makes a difference in their life apart from a pastoral person in their life. So, but those direct representations are what the church has defined itself to. And it makes me think about the Reformation, where the Protestants deconstructed the Catholic Church and all of
That's
that.
right.
So
Exactly.
I mean, to me, I feel like we're going through a similar type of historical revolution
Mhm.
about things, because usually people deconstruct at different points of their life, but like we're doing it massively as a society. So just that historical thing, I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
what do you think about
Well,
that?
yeah.
And
I
what
mean,
do you think we should
I,
do as
I,
disciple makers?
yeah, I just gave a little presentation on this to our Forge Hub leaders at a gathering, and a lot of your listeners probably have heard this or read it, but it's that 500-year disruption cycle of the church, and there was kind of the fall of the Roman Empire, and that happened, and then at about 1,000 AD, then you have um, well, there's a couple of things that happen, but I mean, the Catholic Church has some really bad popes, and there's like tons of stuff going on in the church. And then I can't remember the name of the pope now that like pulled them out of that, and kind of shifted that around that period. And then you also have the Great Schism that happens around that period. And so the Orthodox churches, Eastern Orthodox and Western Church, kind of divide. So, and then 1517, it's Reformation happens. And then people are asking, okay, add 500 to that. And you're like 2017, 2018-ish. So are we going through another kind of, and I would call it a schism. I mean, what's really interesting is what I'm seeing, the bounded boxes that churches and denominations have, what they stood on 20 years ago and said, this is it. I mean, like, we have defined exactly what we want to be and what we believe we should be. Well, now denominations themselves are splitting up into different factions because that bounded set is not it anymore. And so they're the ones that are against deconstruction or deconstructing. That's the irony in all of this.
Deconstructing what they were part of beforehand, right? To
Yeah.
say, well, but
So
not that.
yeah, but I mean, I'm going to go this far in deconstructing, but I'm not going to go this far. That's kind of what they're saying. It's like I'm going to lose this, but I'm not going to go as far as to lose this. so that I don't go, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes, too far. So when I see that gal in my group, all I'm seeing is that she's on a journey too. And, she has gone, quote unquote, too far for some people. But the journey of the deconstruction itself, like re-paradigming yourself, is not lost even on denominations and pastors. They're doing it right now. I mean, you and I could sit here, and we're not going to name denominations, but you and I could sit here. I could easily name 6 denominations that are splitting up right now. And it's over, and probably a couple of big ones that are on their way to it. And all of that is a deconstructive journey, right? It's a re-paradigming of what you're gonna, I don't know, how would you say it? That, how you're gonna frame your journey with Jesus and in the kingdom.
We used to have positive words for it, right?
Yeah,
like
we did.
Paradigm shift and new wineskin and maturation and coming to a conviction. Like we used to have words for the same type, transformation, revelation, and it was cast in a positive light as something to be encouraged, something to be supported, totally question your faith, come to a conviction. But right now we don't have a positive word in paradigm of it, which is a little strange for me. So I'm just wondering, what do you think God's hope and heart is in all of this, and what are you watching for to mark where God's moving so that you can follow that as a disciple maker?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. And let me preface by saying, when someone says deconstruction to me, that's not a negative word to me. So to me, that's a positive word. It's a word of journey, of exploration, of seeking. I really think, I can't say this from research or whatever, but I would think that a healthy person is kind of always deconstructing in some ways, because they're always relearning.
That's true.
They're shifting and they're learning. And so, and we've all met people like our grandparents, that have quit deconstructing. And so they still talk about, what they believe from the 40s, or whatever. So I have a great hope in all of this. But I'm an Enneagram 7, high AP on APES scores. And so like when stuff is like blowing up, I'm excited. So it's like, what's new? What are we going to do? This is exciting, and I'm in the prophetic.
I'm an 8-wing 7, so I love it too.
Yeah.
Okay, there's so much to be done here.
I know. And the prophetic part of me, which scores almost as high as my apostolic, is like, yeah, see, I told you so. Yeah, this is the way we need to go. But I have a sadness for the church, but my hope is that the church that institutional brick and mortar churches will eventually see what's going on and do the hard work to shift and to have conversations. And I think that what's going to drive them there is they're going to close their doors, or they're going to join the conversation and the movement, a lot of them. And that's a lot of the work that I do in Forge. Forge does a lot of work with kind of pioneer people and networks and, house churches and that kind of thing. But my heart, as being someone on staff at a church that launched a network, is to give churches a way forward to kind of frame environments for these kind of conversations and movements. And so I do think there's a connection between what's going on in culture, what's going on in the deconstruction type movements of the church, people not coming back, and churches engaging in smaller environments of expressions, like house churches, businesses, mission, nonprofit work, like seeing church as more holistic community and worship and mission. So that excites me. Like I want to spend the next 10 years kind of helping upper level leadership in churches kind of, they're getting disrupted. And so to walk into that disruption and say, okay, let's reimagine church and let's imagine a new future, a better future. And then how could you join God and his mission again? So that's my hope. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I'm passionate about too, right? So
Yeah.
helping churches make the transition to be that kind of environment that can not only handle the disruption, but walk through it and become the thing that God is recreating on the other side. Because I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So I mean, I do believe in our gathering, but I believe in our gathering around the right purposes and the right center.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where we share that common passion. Well, if people want to get a hold of you or learn more about you, where can they find you out in the interwebs, in the metaverse?
Yeah, well, just text Jessie Cruickshank and she has my number. We have coffee.
Or not.
Yeah, or not. Yeah, so I mean, I've got a website that I don't keep up with, which we discovered this morning because my bio needs to be updated. But it's, rolandsmith.net. You can always, probably one really good way to get hold of me is through Forge America. And I see all the emails. So if you just get on Forge America and just email Forge America, then I'll see it. And then I'm on Facebook and Instagram and, all that kind of stuff. So.
All right. Well, we'll encourage people to find you out there, maybe a little cyber stalking to get if you want to actually contact you. So awesome. Well, thanks for being on today. Like I said earlier, you and I could talk about deconstruction for a long time because it's a journey that we're both passionate about, helping people through and not lose their faith and not give up on God or Jesus or the ecclesia. So we'll have to continue this somehow. Sometime.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, and it's always good to hang out with you and talk.